Maria woke before the sun rose, the city still quiet, except for the soft hum of early traffic. She slipped on her worn shoes and stepped outside the small apartment she shared with her mother. The air felt cool on her skin, and the first birds were beginning to call. Maria carried a wicker basket filled with roses, daisies, and bright yellow sunflowers down the narrow stairs. Each petal still held drops of dew. She locked the door behind her and walked along the cracked sidewalk, humming to herself. The street. Lamps cast long shadows across the pavement, and a few shopkeepers were already opening their doors. Maria greeted them with a shy smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice gentle but firm. They nodded back, offering small waves. She reached her flower stand. A simple wooden cart painted blue, parked under a tall elm tree. Maria arranged each bloom with care. She pushed a rose stem into a glass jar of water, then a sunflower, then a cluster of white daisies. She adjusted the petals until they looked perfect. She stepped back to admire her work. The stand had been her father's before he passed away 2 years ago. He taught her how to cut each stem straight, how to keep the water fresh, and how to greet every customer with respect. Maria remembered his kind face and the way he laughed when she accidentally dropped a stem or spilled water on the stand. She missed him every day, but selling flowers helped her feel close to him. Her mother's health had grown weak after a long fight with illness. The rent ate most of their savings, and medicine cost more than they could spare. Maria learned early how to stretch every penny. The few coins she earned each morning went toward fresh vegetables, warm soups, and the doctor's visits her mother needed. Maria counted her blessings. She had her mother's smile, her father's gentle spirit, and enough courage to face each day. Still, she wished for something more, a life where her mother could rest and laugh again, where she did not worry about every medical bill and every broken appliance in their home. By the time the sun rose fully, the sidewalk became crowded. Office workers clicked along in neat rows, coffee in hand, collars stiff, and eyes focused straight ahead. Delivery bikes wove through traffic, and taxis honked when they did not move fast enough. Maria sold her first bouquet to a young woman in a gray coat. "These will brighten my desk," the woman said. Maria tied a purple ribbon around the stems and handed it over. The woman paid with a crisp bill and walked away with a bright smile. Maria felt a small burst of joy. She already thought of the day as a small victory. Across town, James Marshall was having a very different morning. He woke in a glass-walled apartment on the 20th floor of a downtown high-rise. The sunrise gleamed off neighboring buildings like a beacon. He pressed his cufflinks quickly, checked his watch, which was ahead by 5 minutes, and strode toward the elevator. His phone buzzed with messages, one from his assistant reminding him of the board meeting, one from a reporter asking for a quote, and another from his personal trainer, confirming their session after work. James listened to them as he walked, his eyes scanning each message for words like urgent, deadline, or important. His mind raced with the plans. For his company's next product launch, investors were expecting big numbers. The board meeting today would decide whether they funded his new idea. James never wanted to let them down. He believed in progress, in technology that made life easier. But sometimes he felt like a small gear in a massive machine, always moving, never stopping to feel the wind in his hair or the warmth of a stranger's smile. Still, he did not slow down. Success required speed, and speed was everything. As James walked 2 blocks from his building to the meeting venue, he held his phone in one hand and his coffee in the other. Step, swipe, step, scrolled, his eyes never left the screen. He nearly bumped into a newspaper stand, knocking over a stack of tabloids. He muttered an apology under his breath, but did not stop. People on the sidewalk stepped around him like he was part of the street furniture. Maria, meanwhile, felt the crowd grow larger around her. She set a sign by her cart. "Fresh flowers brighten your day." A man in a suit stopped to examine a sunflower, and Maria offered to pick one with the straightest stem. He nodded and handed her a bill. She tucked the ribbon around the flower's head and watched as he walked off. She glanced at the crosswalk light. It showed a red hand. Pedestrians waited on either side, shifting in place. Maria's heart beat. With gentle excitement, she loved this bustling moment. the way everyone paused together before moving as one. Then it happened. James, a block away, reached the same crosswalk. His mind raced through bullet points in his presentation. He rehearsed phrases under his breath. Innovation, scalable, market share. Glanced down at his coffee, then back to his phone. The little pedestrian icon blinked green, and he stepped forward without looking up. Maria, rearranging roses at her stand, heard a sudden roar. She looked up just in time to see a silver delivery truck hurtling toward the middle of the street. The driver shouted when the light turned red, but the brakes did not grip fast enough. Maria's breath caught. She recognized the man in the gray suit stepping off the curb. He was the same man who bought a sunflower a moment ago. Without thinking, Maria dropped her bouquet and ran. Her feet found the pavement in long, determined strides. She felt her heart pound in her chest like a drum. The roar of the engine filled her ears. Shouts came from every side as people noticed the danger. Maria pushed past bystanders, her dress fluttering at her knees. She did not calculate risk or measure speed. She acted. She reached the man just as his foot hit the street. The strong tug, Maria grabbed his arm and pulled him back toward the curb. She could feel the heat of the truck's engine and the rough scrape of its tires against the asphalt. Time seemed to slow. Maria's arm trembled as she leaned all her weight backward, using every ounce of strength. The man stumbled, eyes wide. With shock, the truck passed by, so close she felt its breeze on her face. The world seemed to blur into a single moment of sound and light. Then the truck was gone, tires squealing into the distance. Maria released the man's arm and fell too. Her knees on the curb, her chest heaving. Petals from the roses floated around her like soft, colorful snow. The man pressed a hand to his heart, his face pale. Maria looked up at him, her own face wet with sweat but calm. She offered a small, reassuring smile. Around them, silence settled. Before the crowd erupted in applause and cheers, Maria did not stand until the man reached down to help her up. He looked at her with gratitude, his voice unsteady as he thanked her. In that moment, their two worlds touched. Maria's world of flower petals and morning light, and James's world of boardrooms and deadlines. Neither knew then that this moment would change both their lives forever. James sat on the curb, his breath catching in his throat as he tried to steady his racing heart. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch his chest, where the thump-thump of his pulse reminded him of how close he had come to disaster. Around him, the city street buzzed back to life. Cars honked as they navigated around the stopped truck. Pedestrians who had swept backward in shock now edged forward again, eager to see that he was safe. Maria stood nearby, brushing grass blades from her knees. She looked calm, though her chest rose and fell with the effort of what she had just done. Her palms still throbbed from the grip she had used to pull James back. She gathered up scattered rose petals and held out her hand to him. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle. James blinked, his eyes focusing on her calm face. He sank during a moment before nodding. Yes, I'm fine," he said, sounding unsure. He tried to stand but wobbled. Maria stepped forward without hesitation and slipped her arm under his. He felt the warmth of her slender arms supporting him. She guided him to stand more firmly, her touch steady and reassuring. A uniformed paramedic knelt beside them. He checked James's blood pressure and listened to his chest with a stethoscope. "No internal injuries," he said. "Just shock. You two did well. Stay seated for a few minutes until you're sure." Glanced at Maria, who smiled softly. "And you must thank you for your quick actions. That was brave." Maria shook her head. "I just did what I could," she said simply. She felt a small flush of pride, but quickly let it go. Her mind was already thinking ahead to her next customer, her next sale. The paramedic gave James a bottle of water. James took it and sipped slowly, eyes never leaving Maria's face. Crowd thinned as people went on their way, some stopping to pat Maria on the shoulder. "Okay." Others walking off, shaking their heads in admiration. A news photographer snapped photos from behind the police tape. "Can you give us a statement?" Reporter called. Maria shook her head and smiled apologetically. "No, thank you," she replied softly. She looked back at James, whose eyes followed her every movement. As the paramedic packed up his kit, James finally found his voice. "I'm James Marshall," he said, extending a hand. His voice was low, but steady now. "You saved my life." Maria accepted his hand, her grip firm. "I'm Maria Santos," she said. "I was just in the right place at the right time." She lowered her eyes respectfully. James shook her hand again, his eyes lingering on her face. He saw the faded freckles on her cheeks, the way her dark hair curled around her shoulders, and the way she held herself with quiet confidence. He remembered the flowers she had sold earlier. Bright sunflowers, soft pink roses, and little white daisies. He felt a surge of gratitude and a desire to help her in return. But before he could speak, a small girl ran up to Maria, tugging at her skirt. The girl held out a crumpled dollar bill and pointed at the flowers still standing on Maria's cart. "Will you help me pick one?" she asked. Maria's face lit up. "Of course," she said, scooping up a bundle of daisies. She knelt beside the girl, carefully choosing the prettiest bloom and tying a ribbon around it. She handed it over with a smile. The girl grinned and skipped away, clutching her flowers. James watched the scene unfold, feeling a strange tug in his chest. He walked over to the cart and leaned against its edge. Maria noticed him and offered a polite nod. "Can I buy a sunflower?" he asked, reaching into his pocket for a crisp bill. Maria's eyes widened. She gathered the sunflowers and tied one with a yellow ribbon. She handed it to him. "I'm sorry," James said quietly, his eyes flicking toward the pendant around Maria's neck. It was small and gold, hanging from a delicate chain. He realized it glinted in the morning sun. Suddenly he felt the world tilt. He dropped the bill back into his pocket. Maria looked at him, puzzled. "Is everything okay?" she asked. James opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. He pointed to the pendant. "That necklace. Where did you get it?" His voice sounded distant and strained. Maria touched the pendant. She had bought it at a flea market, she explained long ago, as a lucky charm.
Ow.
She thought nothing more of it. She turned it over in her hand, looking at its delicate design, a small heart with filigree wings. "I found it in a box of old jewelry," she said. "I like it." James's face went pale. His mind raced back to 5 years ago, the day his daughter's necklace identical to this one went missing during a move. He had searched everywhere, lost and found offices, pawn shops, online listings, had called the police, offered rewards, even hired a private detective. All he had found was empty hope. 5 years of longing for that small symbol of his little girl's smile. He took a step toward Maria, his eyes shining. "My daughter," he said, voice shaking. She had one just like that. Maria froze. The ribbon she'd tied around the sunflower slipped through her fingers. James knelt before her, his eyes fixed on the pendant. He gently took it from her hand.
Act!
Maria gasped softly, but did not resist. She watched as he lifted the tiny heart and traced its wings with a trembling finger. Tears welled in his eyes. "I thought I'd lost this forever," he whispered. Maria's heart pounded. She felt tears in her own eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know." She reached out to take it back, but James held it close. "No," he said, voice thick. "You kept it safe." He looked up at Maria. "It belonged to my daughter." He pressed the pendant to his chest and closed his eyes. For a moment, the busy street, the honking cars, the chattering crowd, all of it fell away. Only the weight of memory remained. Maria knelt beside him, unsure what to do. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "It was meant to find its way back to you," she whispered. James opened his eyes and looked at her with gratitude too deep for words. He sat back on his heels, still holding the pendant. For a long moment, they sat together in silence, bound by their shared connection to this small treasure. The paramedic returned, clearing his throat politely. "Sir, you might want to stand up and get checked at the hospital," he said. James glanced up and nodded. He finally looked at Maria. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." Maria smiled softly. "Take care," she said. She stood and brushed dust from her knees. James rose too, slipping the pendant into his jacket pocket. He glanced at her flower stand once more. Please let me repay you, he said. Maria shook her head. Really, I'm fine, she said. I'm just glad you're safe. She gathered her cleaning cloth and began wiping off the cart's surface. James studied her as she worked. He saw the determination in her eyes, the kindness in her smile, and the strength in her posture. He knew he could not let her walk away. Without helping, he squared his shoulders and spoke again. Maria, he said, would you let me buy those flowers? All of them. He gestured to the cart full of bouquets. Maria paused, surprise etched on her face. She looked at her wares and then back at him. All of them? She asked softly. James nodded. Yes. And if you ever need help, you can come to my company. I want to make sure you and your mother have everything you need. Maria blinked. She closed her eyes for a moment and let out a breath. When she opened them, they shone with gratitude. Thank you, she said. But you don't have to. James held up a hand with a gentle smile. Why too? He said firmly. You saved my life and gave me back something I thought was gone forever. Please let me help you. Maria studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay. She said thank you. James signaled to a passing delivery truck driver to watch the cart while he paid. He handed Maria several bills, enough to cover all her flowers and then some. Maria counted them carefully, eyes wide. She had never had this much money in one place. Her heart swelled with hope. Here, James said, handing her a business card. Call me anytime. Maria accepted it, folding it gently. She slipped it into her apron pocket. I will, she said. She tied the ribbons on the remaining bouquets with extra care and watched as James walked away, carrying a sunflower in his hand. As the morning sun climbed higher, Maria felt a change in the air. The city seemed brighter, the possibilities larger. She thought of her mother waiting at home, of the doctor's bill that would now be paid, of the new shoes she could buy without worry. She smiled, picking up her cleaning cloth again and humming a tune. And somewhere down the street, James stopped and gently touched the necklace in his pocket. He felt his daughter's presence with him once more and knew his life had changed. All because a poor girl saved a CEO from a truck, carried home more than just bruises that day. Maria closed her eyes as she watched James walk away, his figure growing small among the morning travelers. The business card in her hand felt strange and valuable, like a promise she hardly dared to believe. She tied the last ribbon around a bouquet of sunflowers and stared at the bright petals. For a moment, she thought of putting her money back and returning the card. But then she remembered her mother's gentle smile, the worry that had shadowed her face all week as medicine bills piled up, and she tucked the card safely into her pocket. James reached the corner and paused, turning back to look at Maria's cart. He held the sunflower close to his chest, as if it were a treasure. In that moment, he felt more alive than he had in years. The necklace in his pocket pulsed against his heart an echo of his daughter's laughter. He slipped off his jacket, adjusted his tie, and headed toward the hospital. Determined to check his own health and visit the small chapel where he kept his daughter's favorite stuffed bear. Back at the flower stand, Maria watched James disappear. She leaned against her cart, breathing in the sweet scent of her roses and daisies. Her legs felt weak, as if she had run a long race, but her heart felt strong. She counted the bills in her hand again. There was more money here than she had ever made in a single morning. She allowed herself a moment of joy before remembering the task ahead, her mother's medicine, the grocery market, and then home to clean the apartment before her mother woke. She packed up the cart, storing the fresh flowers in water-filled jars and stacking her empty baskets. The morning rush had slowed. Many office workers were already at their desks, and the city hummed with the quiet energy of work in progress. Maria lifted her cart onto the stand's wheels and pushed it down the block, humming softly. Each step reminded her of how small actions like picking a flower or saving a life could change everything. When Maria reached home, her mother lay in bed, her breathing shallow. Maria set the flowers on the bedside table. Bright yellows, soft pinks, and pure whites filled the small room with color. Her mother's eyes opened, and she smiled when she saw the blooms. "They're beautiful," she said, her voice weak but warm. "Where did you get them?" Maria knelt by the bed and took her mother's hand. I sold them this morning, she said. People buy flowers to feel happy. She paused, placing a sunflower where her mother could see it. Someone helped me today, too. She pulled out a few bills, enough to cover the medicines and rent. She handed them to her mother, whose eyes filled with tears. Maria's mother held the money as if it were too precious to touch. My child, she whispered. You work so hard. She reached up and stroked Maria's cheek. Maybe it's time you let someone help you. Maria looked down, her heart pounding. The promise's card, the promise in his offer. She had been trained to rely on her own strength to carry burdens alone. Yet at that moment, she felt the stirrings of hope. She held her mother's hand tightly. I will, she promised, though she did not know how. Meanwhile, James sat in the hospital waiting room. He had gone in to be checked for bruises, but the doctor assured him he was perfectly healthy. James asked to visit the small chapel next door. He walked through its heavy wooden doors and knelt before the altar. The morning light filtered through colored glass, painting the floor in warm patterns of red, blue, and gold. He closed his eyes and pressed the necklace against his heart. He imagined his daughter's face, her wide eyes an infectious grin. He whispered her name, Sophie. He left the chapel feeling lighter. Outside, he pulled out Maria's card. He studied the handwritten letters. Maria Santos, flower stand, Maple, and 5th. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his wallet. He needed to know more about the girl who had given him back a piece of his heart. On his way back to the office, James stopped at a small cafe. He ordered a coffee and sat at a corner table, staring out the window. He watched people hurrying by, a father juggling a briefcase and a lunchbox, a group of students laughing together, an elderly woman feeding pigeons. Each life full of its own struggles and joys. He felt connected to them in a way he hadn't in years. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his assistant. Please find out who owns the flower stand at Maple and 5th. I need to meet her. He hesitated before adding, it's urgent. He pressed send and closed his eyes, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. Back at home, Maria finished cleaning the apartment. She washed dishes until her arms ached, swept the floor, and tidied the small kitchen table. She placed her father's old photograph there, the young man smiling beside a woman in a white dress. Maria stared at it, remembering laughter in the sunlight. She whispered, I wish you were here, Papa, and traced his face with her finger. She turned away, lifting the kettle to make tea for her mother. The apartment smelled of chamomile, warm and soothing. Maria's mother rested, her breathing steady. Maria sat beside her, pouring tea into a small cup. She looked at the necklace around her mother's neck, the simple gold heart she had given her years ago. She reached up and touched it, her mind. Drifted to this morning's events, the rush of adrenaline, James's wide eyes, the crowd's applause. She shook her head in wonder. Later in the afternoon, a knock came at the door. Maria opened it to find a well-dressed man holding a bouquet of mixed flowers, roses, daisies, sunflowers. He smiled gently. Miss Santos? He asked. I'm James Marshall. May I come in? Maria's heart fluttered. She stepped aside. Of course, she said. The man entered, placing the flowers on the kitchen table. Thank you, Maria whispered. James reached into his jacket and pulled out the necklace. He laid it on the table next to her mother's favorite gold heart. Maria's mother opened her eyes and smiled, recognizing the shape. James took a steadying breath. This belongs to my daughter, he said softly. I came because I wanted to thank you properly, and because I want you to have this. Maria's mother took the necklace, her hand trembling. Thank you, she said. You have no idea what this means. James turned to Maria, his eyes warm. I also want to help, he said. If you agree, I have set up a fund for your mother's treatment and a scholarship for you to go to school. I hope you will let me support you both. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her mother, who nodded. Maria turned back to James. Her voice caught in her throat. Thank you, she said. I don't know what to say. James smiled. Just promise me one thing, he said. Keep being brave and keep helping others, like you did for me. Maria placed her hand over his. I promise, she said. That evening, Maria closed the apartment door and leaned against it, her body trembling with relief and hope. She held her mother's hand and looked at the two necklaces lying side by side on the table. One had wings like embroidery and gold. The other was simple, a heart of innocence. Both shone brightly in the lamplight, symbols of love found and love given. Maria's mother nestled into her chair, wrapped in blankets. Maria sat beside her, reading from a worn book of poems. She read softly, her voice steady. Outside, the city lights twinkled. Two lives, once strangers, had become intertwined by a single moment of courage in by a necklace that would carry hopes for the future. In the quiet of their home, they found a new beginning, bound together by gratitude, kindness, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Maria woke to birds calling outside her window. Sunlight spilled across her room, painting the walls gold. She stretched and sat up, feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. Today, she would go to Mr. Marshall's office. It all felt unreal. A week ago, she had been behind her flower cart, arranging roses and daisies. Now she was preparing for her first visit to a skyscraper boardroom. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple blouse and her only clean skirt. She braided her hair neatly, tucking stray strands behind her ears. Before she left, she knelt by her mother's bedside. Her mother smiled, her eyes brighter than they had been in months. "Be brave," she whispered. Maria kissed her forehead and slipped the scholarship papers into her pocket. The envelope from Mr. Marshall lay there, stamped with the company's logo. Outside, the air smelled of fresh bread from the bakery next door. Maria took a deep breath and walked to the bus stop. A bus glided up, and she climbed aboard, finger tracing the pendant at her throat. It felt like a link between two worlds, her world of hardship and Mr. Marshall's world of glass towers and business suits. She stepped off the bus. She stood before the building. It rose into the sky, windows gleaming. Maria's heart beat fast. She adjusted her bag strap and entered the lobby. A woman in a tailored suit greeted her at a desk. "Good morning," the receptionist said, smiling. "Mr. Marshall is expecting you. Please have a seat." Maria sank into a plush chair, feeling the leather beneath her fingers. Minutes later, the doors opened. Mr. Marshall stood there, his face warm. He wore a crisp shirt and held out his hand. "Maria, thank you for coming," he said. His voice felt kind, like he spoke directly to her hopes and fears. He led her through glass corridors, past busy employees typing at shiny desks. Maria noticed the soft hum of computers and the scent of fresh coffee in the air. They stopped at a tall window overlooking the city. Cars moved below like tiny insects, and rooftops stretched to the horizon. Maria caught her breath. "Beautiful," she said softly. Mr. Marshall nodded. "It is," he agreed. "I wanted you to see where your future could be." He handed her a cup of warm tea. She sipped and let the warmth spread through her chest. He guided her to a large conference room. At the center was a polished table surrounded by chairs. He gestured to one side. "This is your space. We've set up a small grant for your education, and I want you to meet the team who will help." He pressed a button, and the lights dimmed. A projector clicked on, showing a slide with Maria's name. Underneath were the words, "Scholarship Recipient, Maria Santos." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. She swallowed and nodded. Mr. Marshall introduced her to 3 employees: Karen, a friendly woman who would guide her through paperwork; Luis, a thoughtful man who would tutor her in computer skills; and Sarah, a quiet helper who would give her a library card to the company's resource center. Each spoke kindly, welcoming her. Maria thanked them, her voice trembling but steady. After the introductions, Mr. Marshall closed the door and sat with her again. "Maria, I want to offer you more than a scholarship," he said. "I want you to tell me, what do you dream of?" Maria thought of her mother, of the small apartment and the flower stand. She imagined studying business, maybe opening a flower shop of her own one day, learning proper bookkeeping and marketing. She spoke of her love for flowers and her hope to help other families. Mr. Marshall listened, leaning forward. "That's exactly what I hoped for," he said. "We'll support you every step of the way. And when you're ready, I'd love to talk about a future role, hear your own small business, under our foundation's support." Maria's mouth fell open. She blinked, heart pounding. She had sold flowers in the same spot for years. Now she was talking about running her own venture with a CEO's help. They spent the next hour planning. Maria signed forms, asked questions, and learned how the scholarship would work. Mr. Marshall explained deadlines, classes, and mentorship meetings. He watched her face light up when she grasped each detail. "You deserve this," he said gently. "Your courage saved my life. Let me repay you by helping you build your dreams." When the meeting ended, Maria gathered her papers. Mr. Marshall walked her to the elevator. The doors glided shut, and the walls lit in warm wood tones. Maria felt a new confidence. She held her scholarship folder close. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, smiling. "You're welcome, Maria. I'll see you soon." Back on the sidewalk, Maria stepped into the sunlight, blinking as if waking from a dream. She reached for the necklace at her throat and touched the wings of the tiny heart. She thought of Mr. Marshall's kind eyes and the busy office filled with people who wanted to help her. She tucked the card and papers back into her pocket before hurrying home. At the flower stand the next morning, Maria arranged a special sign. "Back soon, thank you." She sold what she could before closing early. The regular customers paused to ask where she was going. She smiled and said, "To learn and grow." They nodded, happy to see her excited. She packed her cart and pushed it home, humming with anticipation. That afternoon, Maria took her first online class. She sat at her small kitchen table, laptop open, mother resting beside her. The lesson was about basic accounting. Numbers and charts filled the screen. At first, Maria felt overwhelmed. But then, she remembered the clear explanations from her meeting. She clicked through examples, copying notes into her notebook. Each new concept felt like a seed planted in fertile soil. Her mother watched proudly. She said, Maria smiled, her eyes bright. "I'm doing this for us," she replied. They held hands, and the apartment seemed full of light. Over the next few weeks, Maria balanced her flower stand mornings with study afternoons. She learned how to read profit and loss statements, use simple software, and plan budgets. She practiced English writing, preparing essays for her scholarship reports. Every day, she felt her world expand. The support from Mr. Marshall's team came through, emails offering help, Zoom calls to explain tricky topics, and digital library, links for extra reading. Meanwhile, Mr. Marshall watched her progress with pride, received updates on her grades and shared them with his board. He spoke to his wife about the courage of the young woman who saved him. He thought of Sophie, his daughter, and felt her spirit living on in Maria's determination. One morning, Maria arrived at the office for a mentorship meeting with Luis. They sat at a desk covered in papers. Luis explained a spreadsheet, pointing to columns and rows. Maria nodded, then asked a question. "What if I want to track flour?" "Orders too?" she asked. Luis grinned. "Bad idea," he said. Together, they built a custom template that could track sales, costs, and customer preferences. Maria's eyes sparkled. She saw how she could make her stand more efficient and profitable. At lunchtime, Karen invited Maria to the company cafe. They sat at a round table, plates of soup and bread before them. Karen asked about Maria's family, her mother's health, and her hopes for school. Maria shared her story, and Karen listened, offering words of encouragement. "You have a gift," she said, "your people skills. Your hard work, they'll take you far." Maria looked around at the bright cafe, at people from different backgrounds sharing food and ideas. She felt a warm belonging she had never known. When they parted, Karen handed her a voucher for free lunches anytime she visited. Maria accepted, tears in her eyes. At home that evening, Maria placed the voucher next to her father's photo and the 2 necklaces on the kitchen table. She closed the book she had been studying and leaned back in her chair. Her mother stirred in bed. Maria smiled. "We're changing our lives," she whispered softly. The golden wings at her throat brushed against her skin, and she knew she carried hope with her hope that had taken flight the day she saved a stranger, and that now soared toward a bright new future. Maria woke to the soft glow of dawn and the gentle hum of city life below her window. She stretched and felt a thrill of anticipation. Today was the grand opening of her new flower shop, a small space Mr. Marshall helped her rent just around the corner from her old cart. She slipped into her favorite dress, the one that matched the yellow of sunflowers, and braided her hair into a neat crown. She paused by her mother's bedside and held her hand. Her mother smiled, eyes shining with pride and relief. "You've built something beautiful," she said. Maria kissed her forehead and promised, "I will make us proud," stepping outside. Maria inhaled the fresh air, scented faintly with hope. The shop's sign, painted in soft blues and greens, read Maria's Blooms. She unlocked the door and flipped the close sign to open. Inside, rows of vases held flowers of every color. Roses, daisies, lilies, and sunflowers shimmered under the morning light. Fresh leaves and stems filled the air with a green, earthy smell. Maria arranged the front display with care, placing a bouquet of pink tulips beside a vase of blue hydrangeas. Each arrangement spoke of new beginnings. The bell above the door jingled. Karen, the friendly assistant from Mr. Marshall's office, stepped inside, carrying a bouquet wrapped in silver paper. "Congratulations," she said, her voice warm. Maria beamed. "Thank you for coming." Karen placed the bouquet on a central table, where a small card read, "With admiration, J.M." Maria's heart fluttered at those initials. She remembered the day she met James Marshall on the curb, the silver truck roaring past, and the moment she saw the necklace that belonged to his daughter. Who would have thought that one act of kindness could grow into this? Soon, more guests arrived. Louise carried a cake shaped like a sunflower, its frosting bright yellow with green leaves. Sarah brought a stack of thank you cards, each with a note. From company employees who had watched Maria's progress and wanted to celebrate, Mr. Marshall himself entered last, dressed in a dark suit and smiling broadly. The room fell silent as he approached the center table. Maria's cheeks flushed. He took her hand gently and raised it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady and proud, "I present to you the heart and soul of this shop, Maria Santos." Applause filled the room. Maria swallowed, tears prickling her eyes. She looked at her mother standing in the doorway, leaning on a cane but glowing with excitement. Her mother lifted her hand in a small wave. Maria felt a surge of love and gratitude. She stepped forward and spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Thank you all for believing in me," she began. "I started selling flowers to help my mother and honor my father's memory. Today I stand here because of kindness, first from strangers, then from friends, and finally from one man who trusted me enough to invest in my dream. I promise to fill this shop with beauty and care, to help our community celebrate life's moments, big and small." As she spoke, customers began to trickle in, neighbors she recognized from the block, office workers curious to see her new space, and families drawn by the display. Each left with a small bouquet, choosing petals of hope and leaves of comfort. Maria greeted each person by name when she could, asking about their day, their families, their celebrations. The shop buzzed with laughter and conversation, the kind of warmth that makes people feel at home. Hours later, when the crowd had thinned, Maria sat behind the counter and wiped her brow. She watched sunlight dance on the petals around her. Then she looked at the two necklaces displayed in a glass case by the register, one with delicate wings, the other a simple heart. They shone softly, reminders of how small things one rescue, one lost necklace, could change lives. A customer approached, an elderly woman with kind eyes. She pointed to the necklaces. "What stories they must hold," she said. Maria smiled and invited the woman to sit. She shared the story, how she saved a stranger from a truck, how he froze when he noticed the necklace he thought lost forever, and how that moment led to a friendship and an opportunity neither could have imagined. The woman listened, her eyes moist. When Maria finished, the woman pressed the winged necklace into her hand. "I can't buy it," she said softly, "but I can share it. Keep telling your story so others remember. Kindness matters." Maria felt her heart swell. She clasped the necklace around the woman's neck. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, Maria closed the shop and locked the door. She packed a small bouquet for her mother and headed home. The city lights shimmered as she walked, each lamp a promise that hope shines brightest in the dark. When she entered the apartment, her mother sat by the window, the bouquet on her lap. They embraced, the petals brushing against their faces. "You did it," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. Maria nodded, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she replied. They sat together at the kitchen table, sharing soup and bread. Maria told her mother about the day's events. Laughter, the conversations, the strangers who became friends. Her mother listened, nodding, absorbing each word like sunshine. When they finished, Maria cleared the dishes and turned off the light. As they prepared for bed, her mother took Maria's hand. "You've made me strong again," she said. "Thank you, my child." Maria kissed her mother's forehead and slipped under the covers, the darkness. She thought of the journey, early mornings at the flower cart, the screech of the truck's brakes, the frozen look in Mr. Marshall's eyes, the meetings in glass towers, the long nights of study, and finally, this moment of quiet peace. She held her own necklace, the tiny heart her father gave. Her hand felt warmth spread through her. She closed her eyes, imagining Sophie's laughter and the future blossoms blooming in her shop. The next morning, Maria returned to Maria's. Blooms with renewed energy, she opened the door to sunshine and possibility. A new day stretched before her, full of stories waiting to be told in petals and leaves. She stepped inside, arranging flowers with gentle care. Each bouquet she crafted carried a message: hope, friendship, love, and the power of one simple act. And so, the poor girl who saved a CEO from a truck became a beacon of beauty and kindness in her city. Her flower shop grew into a place where people gathered, lovers, families, friends, and strangers each finding comfort and joy amid the blooms. Maria's life had changed forever, but her heart remained the same, warm, generous, and ready to lift others with the gift of flowers in the years to come. Maria often told her story to customers who asked about the necklaces. She would smile and say, "Kindness blooms in unexpected ways." And she would point to the display case, where memories glimmered alongside petals of every color. A reminder that even the smallest act of courage can plant seeds of hope that grow into gardens of gratitude.